All right, it's time for September wrap up, and for many, many reasons, September was not the month I anticipated. It's just been a time. If you are a Patreon, you've seen vlogs. If you watch my Friday reads, you've had snippets here and there. I'm feeling a lot better now, emotionally. Physically, different story. I actually feel like I have energy, which is fun, because there were just a lot of things that were causing me a lot of anxiety, and whenever I'm anxious, it's not that I even sleep worse. It's just that I'm more fatigued because I feel like it's like my brain's just constantly on and worrying, and it's like, you need to chill. But like, obviously, if you have anxiety, you know that's not like knowing you need to chill and chilling, different things. Regardless, between Donna having some health stuff, which like she's fine, we're just still working on figuring out how to get her more normal with poops and things like that. Like, I don't know, it's not a big issue. It's fine. It all started with a fur ball. The fur ball's gone. She's not at risk, but we're still adjusting there. But I'm now in like a headspace of like, whatever, we'll get there, right? I'm more chill than I was in September, and when I'm not chill, I can't read. I'm just like on my phone, just scrolling, looking at Google, trying to find answers. It's not healthy. And then we got new furniture, which is really exciting. But in the process of getting new furniture, I think I did something in my lower back, and it's not muscular. I think it's probably more spine related. Regardless, some nerves have been very irritated, but only when I sit. And I don't know when you guys read, but I read when I sit or lay down. So being distracted by weird nerve things while sitting or laying down just makes my brain go, this is wrong. What should I be doing about it? And like, so the combination of all of that meant that I only read 6 things this month. Now, there are caveats. I read probably 2/3 of Rhythm of War. So like that'll go into the October wrap up because I haven't finished it yet. But if you've read a Stormlight book, like 2/3 of like 1,300 pages is a lot. So I did read a lot of that. And I did start, and I am pausing, Long Live Evil. This is a book I'm reading with my friends. And I think, like, I'm going to finish it with my friends. I have the audiobook, but if there's no, like, I'm trying pausing. People pause all the time. I'm not a very good pauser. But my other friends don't even have the book yet. I even used an Audible credit to get the audiobook. So it's like, I don't even have, like, a library. I need to get it done or else it's gone forever sort of thing. It's just, I don't dislike it. But I think meta stories sometimes really don't work for me. And I'm trying to figure out when it does and when it doesn't. And I think it has to do with setting sometimes. Like, for example, I would say the Indian Lake trilogy by Stephen Graham Jones, My Heart is a Chainsaw, incredibly meta and self-aware of what it is. But it's not like inserting a contemporary character into a fake historical setting. And I think that's where I'm being a little jarred. I don't know. And maybe it's also like, I love Jade Daniels. So I can get behind her meta-ness because I love her. I think she's quirky. I think she's a little neurotic. I love her growth, but like her internal voice works for me. And I would totally see why that very strong voice wouldn't work for others. The main character in Long Live Evil doesn't feel real to me, and it's very odd. She's a character going through things. Like in the real world, she has terminal cancer and is going to die. And she's given the chance to go into her favorite fantasy series, which is her favorite, and she's never read the first book, which is like, I'm not trying to gatekeep fandoms or anything, but I just feel like you can't say something's your favorite if you haven't read the first book. But I don't know. Regardless, it means she doesn't quite know what's happening in the story, so it helps us with, plot conveniences and stuff. And like, when she's in the contemporary world, I really liked her voice. And I liked listening to her internal thoughts and her relationship with her sister and what she does and doesn't like in the story. Like, I liked her voice then. But then the minute she's put into the story, I can't believe she actually is evil. I don't understand her. And she says a lot of really corny cliche things that just feel like, I guess how people typically, like, they talk about Marvel movies and like how they don't like the writing and like the dialogue. It feels like that to me. And like none of the other characters have felt real to me yet. So I'm having a character connect problem. And then that tied with the meta nature of like, I don't know, this weird plot. It's like very plot back and forth. Like things happen. And if you know me, that's like not why I read, that's why I watch. Like media that I watch, I want plot stuff happening. Media that I read, plot stuff can be happening, but I'm more there to like be in the minds of characters and be in the scenery. Like I'm choosing to stay longer in your story by the act of reading a book because I want it to be longer. So I don't know. Maybe my opinions would change again. I think I also thought it was going to be more of a romantasy, and maybe it is, but I'm 30 3% of the way in and I have no idea who the love interest is. Like, it's almost like it's meta. In this world, there is the main character who's like bland milk toast sort of thing, who's in the love triangles of love triangles, but like I haven't really met her, and our main character is the villain in the story. I don't know. It's okay. Again, if I wasn't reading it with my friends, it'd be a hard DNF. But since like I nominated it for our book club, and I have the audiobook, and it's not like I mean, worst case, it's a 3-star read. Like, it's not the end of the world. So yeah, that's what's happening there. So those are things that like I've consumed, right? Like 2/3 of Rhythm of War plus 100 pages of that, and then these 6 books that I have. And like I only have 5 next to me. One of them we'll talk about first, just because like I don't want to forget it, because it's the audiobook, ebook that I consumed, and that's Memory by Bejeweled. We started off this month so strong. And actually, there's only one book I read this month that I really didn't like. So in terms of quality, doing great. So Memory, God, if I know what number Verkosigan book this is, but it's a Verkosigan book, and I loved it. This is a great book if you love the themes of changing life paths in your early 30s, which, you know, a lot of you are in your early 30s or mid 30s. Like, when I look at my demographics, a lot of you are my age, and I'm 31. So that was interesting, very cathartic. There's a lot of great Barayar character dynamics. So, like, reading this series, you know, we've had a lot of these characters with Miles in other books, but having, like, kind of most of the team in one spot has been very enjoyable the last couple books. So yeah, it was just a good Verkosigan book. What else is there to say to those I haven't already convinced to read this series? It's really fun. I really liked it. Maybe not as much as other people. I feel like for some people, this is, like, their favorite. And for me, it's on par with a lot of my favorites, but it's not my favorite. I think I might have liked Mirror Dance more. Maybe. Which is the one before this one. Even though Mirror Dance definitely has heavier material. But I think sometimes I get burnt out on Miles. So Mirror Dance didn't have as much Miles, and I kind of like that a little bit. But I'm very curious where we go now that we've had this series pivot. We had, like, you know, this... Well, and, like, that happens a lot in the series. The first 2 books are Cordelia and Varl, and then the rest have been Miles, and Miles doing this very specific, he runs a mercenary sort of thing, and now we're pivoting from that, so, like, where are we going? And I'm curious. Okay, so other things I read. Let's start with the dud. Well, it's not a dud, but I just didn't really like it, and that's The Siege of Burning Grass. This was the last book I wanted to read for the Ursula K. Le Guin Award in Fiction. I have a video going over through all of my thoughts for that, and I kind of group them into literary fiction, genre literary fiction, and then just genre and, like, my favorites and all of that. Yeah, and, like, this one, it just didn't work for me because I don't think it was doing what I wanted it to do with the themes in a way that I found interesting, and the things I found interesting, the book didn't find interesting, and that's always my least favorite thing. It's like, you made this bananas cool world, and obviously there's a reason for that, but instead you're just going to focus primarily on a plot and a story that could be set up in any world, just our world, if you just wanted to just do an alternative history book or something like that. And I didn't really like the characters, and again, character connection is, like, big for me. It could have been stronger, I think, if it was dual POV. We have these 2 people that are traveling together, and our main character is a pacifist who the world kind of perceives as someone who should be violent because he is kind of, his body is deformed in a way that makes them be like, woof, you should be fighting on the front lines. And he's like, no, I'm an extreme pacifist. So he's, you know, himself. Like, he's not a bad character, although I feel like even though his entire point of view is the entire 300-some pages of this book, I don't really know him that well. And then he travels with this man who was just that complete opposite, fanatic for the war effort sort of thing. And I think getting his internal thoughts could have been interesting, especially since there are moments in the book that could have pushed against his viewpoint, and I would have wanted to see, did that push? Did it not push? And it's also then a rebellion story, and it's a rebellion story with an ending that I'm like, was that believable based off the rules you gave me? I don't know. You didn't give me enough of the world building for me to know, other than showing me it was cool. Because part of the thing that kept me going in the book was this mysterious world. These 2 people are fighting. Why are they fighting? The reveals of that are, I think, basically the point of it is stupid, because war is usually started from some scuffle over something that's, like, when you finally look at the thing that started the whole war, really not proportional to what has come. And so that made sense, but then, like, I didn't understand the politics and the culture of the people we're fighting, and so when those people chose to do what they did at the end of this book, I was just like, does that make sense? Does that make sense? And I don't think it does. I really I really don't. Maybe that's because I don't see an example of that in our world, and so I just find it unbelievable. And maybe, the point is to imagine something different. So in some ways, the project of this I appreciate and respect more than my experience consuming it, but I also, I have critiques of the thematic work. I have critiques of the execution of how we were exploring that, if that's the whole point of the book, right? So yeah, I do think I got the atmosphere down pat, though. If you want to experience something grim, we talk about grimdark a lot in the fantasy spaces, but this is super grim. I have read grimdark books that don't make me feel the loss of total war that this one did. The lack of resources and food, the absolute absence of life that you feel as we travel through these pages is just palpable. So that at least it nailed right on the head. The other book I read for the Ursula K. Le Guin Award in Fiction is The Skin and Its Girl, and I really liked this one. This one is one of my favorites of the year, I feel. I really like the writing style, which, when I find a literary fiction book whose writing style works for my brain, I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. And it's not because it's overly descriptive. It just flowed. That's the best way I can describe it. I don't know if that's super helpful. The narrative is about this girl who was born with blue skin and extra dense, talking at the gravesite of her aunt, who was a big force in raising her. Kind of reflecting on stories about her aunt that she learned after her aunt passed, reflecting on how her aunt was instrumental in raising her, and trying to make a decision for herself as the new auntie of the family of, does she stay with her family or run away with her love? And comparing that to what her aunt chose. It's really a story about her aunt. It's a story about this family who left Palestine and made their own life in the United States. You do have scenes where they go back to Palestine, and those are pretty hard. But it's also a story where you really get to experience the culture of people who are from Palestine without the baggage of the amount of trauma the average person from that culture gets to experience, which I really appreciated. Not to say there aren't heavy things in here. There are a lot of trigger and content warnings, not just for that representation of the culture, but the mother character is incredibly mentally unwell. So if you have any issues with those types of trigger warnings, I've talked about them in other videos, but check them out for yourself. They're the type of trigger warnings that YouTube gets annoyed at when people say it. So just it's never on page, but the ideation is described. So if that's at all triggering. But I just loved it. I think about if I see a copy in the wild, I would buy one. That usually means it's a favorite status. Even if I don't give it a full 5 stars, that's usually that memory of reading that book sparks joy, if that makes sense. Another book that this is probably my next lowest, although I had a good time with it. I've been reading a lot of Sarah Pinsker this fall. So this is Haunt Sweet Home. I got a copy from the publisher, and I had an e-arc, but all opinions are my own. I don't know why I would change they didn't pay me. And even if they paid me, it's they wouldn't have paid me a lot. What would they do? Pay me $1? Talk about a book. But Haunt Sweet Home, I read one Sarah Pinsker before, that We Are Satellites, and apparently in We Are Satellites, which is a fantastic contemporary near-future science fiction book, there was a show that was a combination house renovation show, paranormal detective show kind of thing. Those two kind of corny shows you would find on TV. And so that show had a different name in that book, but became this novella called Haunt Sweet Home. Haunt Sweet Home is more of a character study, and I think that's where it shines. We have our main character in this who is truly in their mid-20s, doesn't know what they're doing in their life. The family's kind of given up on them in terms of them aspiring to anything. And her cousin, who is doing really well, offers them a job being part of the night crew on his show. And it's not his show, but he's the star. He's the person who's I guess, gosh, I never watched HGTV or anything like this, but I don't know, isn't there the brothers that renovate things? He's one of the main people that's always in every episode, and he interviews the couples and stuff like that. And so she's part of the night crew, and she's in charge of setting up the hauntings, because these aren't organic hauntings for the show. And then, of course, because it's kind of a spooky book, there may or may not be actual paranormal things happening. I hesitate to really say that because at no point did I feel that this was a truly creepy story. I really did think it was a good intro to the spooky season for me, because it was slightly unsettling, but it was definitely more of an internal psychological horror, if you want to call it a horror. It's not very strong in those aspects. But I do feel by the end of the story, the character went through a relatively fulfilling arc, and since that ended up being what drew me in, I liked being in her head a lot. I liked seeing her struggling. I liked seeing her finding a job that even though she didn't like necessarily love it, she was becoming good at it, and that type of confidence it gave her, I enjoyed that. I liked that paired with some of the weird stuff that was happening around her and what that made her kind of see within herself. So yeah, it was good. Not my favorite Pinsker. I've definitely read other Pinskers I've liked more, but it was a good time. Next up, we'll talk about my reread, and then we'll end with maybe my favorite of the month. Unsure. I don't know what my ratings are for anything, but my reread was the Jasmine Throne. This was my first book of the month, and like truly, I read it in like 3 days. Like the momentum at the start of this month was like amazing. And then Donna had diarrhea, but you know, like literally I think I was finishing the Jasmine Throne and then Donna got diarrhea. Like that was pretty much the 1-2 punch. I talk about this book a lot. I have a standalone review on the channel. You best believe there'll be a should you read once I finish, the Lotus Empire. What to say that I haven't said before, other than, I don't know, like, I just love it, okay? We have strong characters. I love a strong character. I love that these characters balance their internal selfish desires and the greater political and, like, I don't know, moral desires of the world. I think that's something we don't do as much in a traditional fantasy. Your good guy is not always, like, 100% good. But, like, their agenda is not normally so blatantly tied to their individual needs. Sometimes, like, the book will be quirky and be like, but he used to be, a thief in the past and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Like, but in this one, you really feel like Priya, their main goal is trying to figure out their own internal agency. They want to find a connection to their past again, to their power. They have a bunch of forces pulling them in different directions between Malini, Bhumika, and her brother. I forget his name right now. And, at the end of the day, the path she takes is the path that she thinks is both the most right, but also the most right for her. And it's the same thing with Malini and Bhumika. Like, all of them are actively balancing in their head their own internal decisions for what they want, but also what is the right thing based off of their morals. And I just really love it. So if you like complicated, strong characters who are generally easy to root for, like I'm not going to say these are like really morally gray, but I just think that conflict of internal want versus the greater good is really not done on page in a way that I see in this book and I feel. And it's even better in the next book that I'm excited to read very, very soon. And the setting's great. You feel humid, you feel hot. It's got weird nature magic that you don't quite understand, and I love unpacking the magic of a world. Yeah, it's got epic moments. Like, there's so many epic moments even just in this first book that it's just jam-packed full of fantasy goodness. This is like why I read fantasy, is a book like this. And then the last book I read this month is The Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. Maybe? Like, this and Nettle and Bone are pretty close. I think I like Nettle and Bone a smidge more, but this is, like, up there for favorite novels by T. Kingfisher. This is not a romance, though. I know a lot of people maybe have only read T. Kingfisher's, like, fantasy romance book and assume that's what she does all the time. She's got, like, what I would classify as, like, 3 or 4 different camps. She's got her horror books. She's got her fantasy romancy books, and she's got her like retelling books. And her retelling books can sometimes have romance, but they're sometimes just more like horror twinged and creepy, kind of like if the Brothers Grimm was on steroids. Okay? And this falls into that latter camp. And I've had mixed success with that. Like I think I just recently read Seventh Bride, which is maybe one of her first published books, and it was fine. Like I liked it. I didn't love it. And then I read this, I'm like, oh, you have come so far. It's been like 9 years since she published Seventh Bride. And I'm like, yeah, this is good. One of the best things about it, dual POV. One is a 14-year-old girl. One is a 55-year-old lady. Amazing. Love that. If you know something about T. Kingfisher, she's really good at writing gullible, naive characters, and she's really good at writing middle-aged women. Like, she's really good at both of those things, so to have both, amazing. It is twisted. Dark things happen. I had to put it down for a minute because I'm like, what? Did we really? Okay. Like that happened. I love the friend dynamic. We have this house where we get to have a bunch of Hester's, the older woman's friends, come into town, and you get to see their group dynamic. Fantastic. Love it. In the acknowledgments, T. Kingfisher recognizes that she might have a problem with horses. That does extend to this book. And, having thought about it, I'm like, yeah, having read some of your Clockwork Boy books, it's like, you really make riding a horse sound very painful. And apparently it's because she had a very bad experience. I don't know, it's in the acknowledgments. It's quite a funny story. I mean, T. Kingfisher is always funny to me. I have not consumed the Goose Girl story. I know this is based off that. I assume it's based off the relationship between Cordelia and her mother, Evangeline. Evangeline is a sorceress. That's the sorceress that comes to call. She can make people obedient to her and does that with her daughter frequently. And has decided that her current suitor situation is not good and is going to find another suitor, and that's how she ends up in Hester's life, and that's how we all end up on the same estate, and things happen. And yeah, I just enjoyed it. I didn't think it overstayed its welcome. I loved seeing Cordelia come into her own because she was very isolated. So seeing Cordelia come out of isolation, Hester has amazing representation for chronic pain, which, as someone who's had chronic pain for most of the month of September, I don't know if it's called chronic yet, but it's been weeks. So I feel like anything more than 2 days feels chronic to me. But, you know, there was like a camaraderie I had with Hester. It's like, yeah, you're okay. So I really liked this one. I think it's really worth it. I think it's really ideal if you like unsettling dark fairy tales in your fall-winter mix. Like if that's something where you're like, yeah, this is the time of year where I want that. It's going to have some unsettling imagery. It's going to have consequences. It's not like cozy. Like, I mean, some things are cozy about it, but that it's the classic T. Kingfisher cozy until it's not, which is my favorite thing. Like, that's why I read her quite a bit, to be honest. I think she's funny, and I like the cozy dark combo and how she mushes it together. So, like I said, you know, quality over quantity this month. I still somehow chatted way too long about 6.5 books or something like that, but it's okay. Let me know what you read this month. How is your reading momentum going? Is it where you want it to be? I would like to get back up to 8 to 10 books. That's my sweet spot. 6 is a little low. When I looked at that number, I'm like, did I forget to log a book? Because I've been really bad at logging books. I'm trying to be better this month. This month, I'm actually trying to, like, track my reading for the first time in, like, 2 years. We'll see how it goes. Like I said, my energy's kind of high. Like, I actually even, like, didn't feel exhausted prepping videos this week, which is, like, it's been a while. I think I've just really accepted that life is chaos, and I'm just going to ride it out. If you just want to leave an emoji to let me know you're here. Don't they have witches? Like, leave a sorceress, leave a witch, a wizard. I know there's an emoji, something like that. Someone with a wand, or you can do a wand, even though there is no wand in that book. Or, on the flip side, you can do a horse. And if you know, you know. Otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.